Hello magical makers, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am Nicole of Woven Tales Designs. In today's video we are introducing a very long awaited tutorial. This is the Ever After hat. I hope you're excited. This has been a long time coming and I am so happy to finally be able to present it to you on my YouTube channel. Before we get into the materials and tools that you will need for this pattern, let's talk about the types of stitches and techniques that we are using for this pattern because they are very similar to the previous patterns of the mouse ear headband, but in case you've never worked those up before, I'd like to give you a chance to see if this is the right kind of pattern for you to work up. So let's talk about it. So the types of stitches we're using for this pattern are very similar. We will need to know how to do a single crochet stitch, a half double crochet stitch, chain, slip stitch, all those usual things. You will also need to know how to work into the third loops only of a half double crochet stitch. I do break that down and slow it down in the video, in the tutorial. We will also be working continuously in the round to create the ear bases. And for those that have done the other pattern, the Ever After Ears headband pattern, this has a different type of seaming method. It was not using an ear strip like before. This is a much thinner looking seam. In fact, it's practically an invisible seam, if you will, of the front and back ear pieces. So that is something to look forward to. This is one out of 4 versions of this pattern. You're gonna have 2 different weights of yarn. We have the medium weight category 4 weight yarn, or worsted weight as most people call it. And then we have the chunky weight version as well. These are also broken into 2 different types of attachment methods. So this one today we are covering is the glue method, where you are using a hot glue gun once the ears are created to attach it to the hat. With the other versions we are going to cover, it's going to be a non-glue or the sew version. Other details that I'd like to mention is that this is definitely a much faster version of the Ever After Ears. In the previous versions, you would have to cover the headband to be able to add the ears on. All you really need is a hat, and then the rest of the pieces are crocheted. It is so much more simple. I actually really love this version because I am much more of a hat person than I am a headband person. This is perfect for kids, for anybody that wants the gender neutral look, for guys. If you've worked this pattern up before and you are wondering, okay, can I skip ahead anywhere into this video just so I can skip to the part where I add them to the hat? Yes, you can skip ahead, skip past the ear bases. The instructions are exactly the same. I will leave the link down in the description below for all the original videos that pertain to this hat. So if you have the original pattern memorized, just work up the 4 ear bases with a normal tail, weave all your ends in, but don't seam anything together because we will be doing a different seaming method of the ears. Go ahead and work up this 4 ear bases if you've made the ears before. If you haven't, let's go ahead and talk about the materials and tools we will need for this tutorial, and let's get started with this magical Ever After Ear hat.
Alrighty, magical makers, let's get into the tools and materials that we will need to begin today's project. Opening up my bag here, I have a 5mm hook and I have a pair of scissors. I'm going to need a tapestry needle to weave in those ends. I do weave in my ends as I go. And then I will need a stitch marker for working continuously in the round. And then for our hat prep, we do need a couple extra things. We need a measuring tape, and I do use inches for my measurements. And we're gonna need something to write on the hat with. And whenever we add the ears to the hat, you will not see those markings anymore. So it doesn't matter if you use a marker or a pen or a Sharpie, it won't be seen later. You're gonna need a hot glue gun. So grab yourself one that you can rely on. I like the Gorilla Glue brand, but honestly, it's really not that big of a deal. Anyone will do. If you pick one that has 2 different settings, just know that I will be using the low setting on my hot glue gun. And then, of course, the main attraction here, we have our hat. This is a standard baseball hat with 6 sections or segments and a button at the top. So if you want to use one that's like mine, there you go. And then we have our yarn. Now today you're going to see me using 2 different types of yarn for our medium weight yarn, just because I want you to be able to see the seaming that we do. And I don't want it to be hard to pick out the stitches. We're gonna need some polyfill stuffing to stuff our ears. And we'll also need something to stabilize the inside of the ears, which will come in handy I like to use this high density craft foam. It's usually between 5 and 7 millimeters thick, but you guys can use cardboard or whatever you have on hand. It's truly your own creation. And on that note, let's go ahead and grab our yarn, grab our crochet hook, and let's dive into chapter 1. We're going to start working on the ears. Yay! Get excited. All right, magical makers, welcome to the voiceover part of this tutorial. Let's get started. We are starting with our ear bases, which are the circular main parts that you see of the ears. And to begin round 1 of an ear base, we are going to create a magic ring, however you are used to doing so. And I believe if you know the chain 2 method, which I know some people use for amigurumi, you can also do that instead, but I prefer a good old-fashioned magic ring. It makes my life easier. And you're going to chain 1 to begin, as always. And then into the magic ring, you're going to work 7 single crochet. 7 single crochet. Once your 7 single crochet are done, you will pull that tail tightly to close up the ring and then get yourself ready for round 2. Now, throughout this voiceover, I do want to let you know that I will be adding in little tips and tricks and a little light humor, as I like to do. So if you ever have any questions that I don't answer, it's okay to leave them in the comments section down below. I am a stay-at-home mompreneur, so I will be checking those regularly if you ever need to ask me something. Alrighty, moving right along, round 2, we're going to begin growing our circle, and we will be, from now on until further notice, we will be working continuously in the round, so get that stitch marker ready. Into every stitch around, you will be working an increased stitch. So 2 single crochet into each stitch around, and that's going to double your stitch count to 14 stitches for round 2. And you're going to see me reach in my bag for my stitch marker because I forgot to take it out before I started filming. So there we go. So yes, just work 2 single crochet into each stitch around, increasing 7 times for a total stitch count of 14 single crochet for round 2. And if you are a little bit naughty like I am sometimes and don't you don't use a stitch marker, that's okay. I know some people like to take a walk on the wild side, but just always check your stitch count because having the wrong stitch count does matter for this pattern, and trying to add it in later or taking it away later is not going to bode well for you. I know this from experience and after making many of my mouse ears. So, you have been warned. All right, and I'm going to pause here at the end of round 2 and just retighten my tail. And then I go in and I just knot that. You don't have to double knot it. I just sometimes like to do a single knot. But I do that now before it gets too late. And believe it or not, doing this in the beginning helps my tension way better. My tension is so consistent when I do this at the beginning of the ear base. All right, and then we're going to flow right into round 3 here. For round 3, we have a repeat of single crochet into the next stitch, and then increase into the next stitch. So you're going to repeat that all the way around, single crochet into the next stitch, and then increase into the next stitch. This is going to bring your stitch count up to 21 stitches for round 3. And there you go. Pretty simple. We're going to continue to do this increasing for a little bit now, so it's pretty simple. We're just making a circle right now. Nothing too crazy. Okay, round 4, we are continuing to increase our circle. We are going to work single crochet into the next 2 stitches and then increase into the next stitch. That will be our repeat. You're going to do that all the way around, single crochet 2, and then increase into the next stitch. You're going to get a total stitch count of 28 stitches for round 4. And yeah, that's pretty simple. Now I will say, if you know how to stagger your increases, feel free to do so. It really won't make a difference because the last round that we do in this pattern will even out any of these corners we start to see. So it's up to you, but I just wanted to give you my 2 cents there. Okay, round 5, again, increasing. We are going to work a repeat of single crochet into the next 3 stitches and then increase into the next stitch. So again, that's single crochet 3 and then increase into the next stitch. And you're going to work that all the way around until you achieve a stitch count of 35 stitches for round 5. And your circle should be growing quite nicely by now. We are going to be splitting in the next round. You're going to start to see the instructions change a little bit because of child size and adult size. So just a little heads up on that. If you're looking up at the screen, it will have little notes up there to kind of distinguish the difference. Okay, round 6. One more round of increases for the child size. We are going to work single crochet 4 and then increase into the next stitch. Ignore what my hands are doing right here. I kind of got ahead of myself in filming. I'm just showing you that at the end of this round, you will actually join to the first stitch and then you're going to work up a chain, but don't worry about that just yet. We'll do a little reminder later on in a little bit here. For both sizes right now, all you have to do is single crochet 4 into the next 4 stitches and then increase into the next stitch. You're going to repeat that all the way around to have a stitch count total of 42 stitches for round 6. And this is the same for both sizes. At the end of this round, the child size will join to the first stitch made, and then you do not turn your work. Anytime we work up our ear bases, the right side is always going to be facing us. That's just a rule of thumb. It's only when we go to seam our ear bases together later on that you will be flipping your piece where the wrong side will be facing you. But don't worry about that right now. We'll get to that later. So yes, for round 6, both sizes, you're working single crochet 4 and then increase into the next stitch all the way around for a stitch count total of 42 stitches for round 6. Okay, so right now I have reached the end of round 6, and as if I'm working the child size, I'm joining to that first stitch, and then I'm going to chain 2. That's a little bit of a cheat ahead there. I do not show chain 2 in the instructions, but just join to the first stitch. We'll chain 2 later if you're working the child size. If you're not working the child size, we're going to go ahead and continue one more round of increases for round 7. Okay, for the adult size only, so if you're working child size, do not do this round. You're going to work a repeat of single crochet into the next 5 stitches and then increase into the next stitch. Again, that's single crochet 5 and then increase into the next stitch. You're going to repeat that all the way around to have a grand total of 49 stitches for round 7. Again, this is the adult only size. So if you are not making a mouse ear hat for an adult, if you are making it for a person that is between the ages of 2 and 9, do not do this round. And then if this is you working up the adult size, at the end of this round, you will join to the first stitch made and do not turn your work. The next round will be, just a heads up, a little bit funny, but only like funny to me. I don't think it's funny at all. It's not humorous. It's just a different round, and you'll see in a bit. Okay. Okay, so again, if you worked round 7 for the adult size, you're going to join to the end of the round, and then both sizes now, go ahead and chain 2, and then we're going to work a half double crochet into the same stitch that we joined to. And then you are going to work half double crochet around into the next 34 or 40 stitches. So that's 34 stitches if you working the child size, and then 40 stitches if you're working the adult size. And then into the next stitch after that, you're going to work half double crochet, chain 2, and slip all into the same stitch. And that should be the 36th and 42nd stitch of that round that you will be doing that. So as you see me here, speeding it up a little bit, half double crochets are so fun, but they still take time. To repeat myself, we work half double crochet into the same stitch that we joined to after we chained 2. And then you work half double crochet into the next 34 or 40 stitches. And then into the last stitch you'll be working, you'll work half double crochet, chain 2, and slip stitch. Now, I know people get a little bit worried here. And after reading many comments over the years, you are going to be left with about 6 or 7 stitches that have not been worked into. That is on purpose. And the reason we leave these unworked is because they're like a kind of like an edge that we need to use to attach our ears to the hat. If you worked up the headband pattern before, it was the same deal. We needed that bottom edge to be a little bit less so that we could use kind of more of like a flat surface to add the ears to the headband. So same situation. You're going to go ahead and fasten off after you've worked all of those stitches up. And then you are going to weave in that last end. You only see me in this video weaving in one end for the ear bases. I tend to just trim the original tail. It's already knotted, it won't come out. So because you won't see that kind of trim job on the inside of your work, I just kind of leave it like that. But yes, go ahead and fasten off, weave in that end that you just fastened off, and then we will have a little bit of a note. But again, to reiterate, you should have 6 to 7 unworked stitches, and basically you're just not working into the last set of repeats from the previous round, if that makes sense. And this is super important. Again, this is if you've checked your stitch count throughout, this should be correct. If not, go back in and fix that, because these ear bases will show mistakes, I guarantee you. Okay, so as I'm snipping off this tail here, we're going to pause the video, and you are going to make 2 more identical ear bases by working rounds 1 through 7 or 8, and then that should give you 3 total of those ear bases. Then you're going to make a 4th and final ear base, working only the rounds 1 through 6 or 7. So basically you're working all the single crochet rounds for a 4th base, and then pull up a long loop so it doesn't unravel. We're going to use this 4th ear base to kind of measure out the insert that we put on the inside of the ear to stabilize it. So here you see my 3 identical ear bases that I worked up. And then here you see my rounds 1 through 6 or 7 of the ear base, no half double crochets. We're going to use that in just a second. Okay, so we're going to now take this 4th ear base. I hope you paused the video and had no trouble with those other ear bases. I'm going to take that ear base, and we're going to use this as a template to cut out the first ear insert, just the first, so you only need it for a little bit here. You have a choice of using either the sharp edge of scissors to do so, or using a marker. Today I'm working with a white or light colored foam, so I'm going to go ahead and use a marker. In previous videos for the headband version of the Ever After ears, I used the edge of scissors to do this because my foam was black and really hard to see any kind of markings whatsoever, and I didn't have like a white gel pen to use. So this is one way to do it, and you don't even have to trace an entire like line of a circle around the ear base. I just do these dashes. That's just the new method that I've come up with. It's faster, simpler, because honestly, I'm not 5 and I know how to cut a circle. I just need a little bit of help to know the guidelines of the size of it. So anyway, here you see me tracing that ear base, and now I'm going to set it aside. I will pull it back later for 2 seconds just to double check my work, but there we go. And again, if you want to use scissors instead, if you're working with a dark foam or cardboard or just something that's a little bit darker in color, open those scissors up and carefully, don't grip the blade with your hands, just press into that foam or cardboard or whatever you're using to get a little indentation. And you don't have to go through all the way to the bottom, just enough to be able to visibly see it. And then you're going to use that as your cutting guideline for this insert. There we go. So I kind of showed you both ways to do it. It just depends on what you're working with. So there's multiple ways to, as they say, and I hate this phrase, skin a cat, but there's multiple ways to cut out an ear base here. So then I proceed to just cut a rough shape around what I traced, and then I cut the full shape out, trimming any sides that I see are kind of like, pointy, just because our ear base in that form before we add the half double crochets isn't very round. It's got the corners still from the increases. So just go ahead and trim off any weird corners that you see, making it as round as possible. This does count, and this will show through your work. The ears will look a little bit uneven if you're not getting a near perfect circle. So just be forewarned. I'm going to take my ear base and put it on top just to make sure that it's pretty much the same size as the crochet fabric piece. And mine is, so I'm happy with that. If it's not, you can go ahead and trim that down. And now we need to kind of cut a little bit of a line, or I should say like a little bit of section off of the bottom. You can just eye this, but if you want to be precise, I'll kind of trace the top edge of my ear base onto the insert and cut that off. Or I just kind of fold up the bottom here as you see me doing. Again, there's multiple ways to get this done. There's no right answer. If you were someone that wanted to make a bunch of these and you wanted to be super precise, you could cut your own template and then just use that template to do multiple ears. But I just like to work with, every yarn works up differently. So I just like to make sure that I'm going with the yarn that I'm working with. And then once that first one is cut, we are going to use that newly cut insert as a template to cut out the second ear insert, just like that. And I kind of sped ahead so you don't have to be watching my hands cut any more foam. Once you have those 2 ear inserts cut, you won't need them, set them aside, and then pause this video. Before moving on to the next section, go ahead and finish the last round of that 4th ear base. Okay, so we're going to grab 2 of our ear bases now that those are finished and worked up. And I just want to give you a little bit of a preview on how we're changing this seaming method. If you've worked the headband before or seen this pattern before, I have what's called an ear strip that is used to connect the 2 ear bases together. But we're not doing that. I wanted to give you guys a little more streamlined and thinner joining method. In the previous pattern, I had to match the width of the headband, and that's why I did that. But for this, we're just working with a hat. We don't have to match anything. So this version is going to be much slimmer. So if you're just joining in because you've known how to work up the ear bases, we are doing a slicker look, in my opinion, to the seaming method. And I'm also working with a different color yarn, as you see, and this is just so you guys as the viewers can see the difference between the seaming stitches and the ear bases themselves. It's just a visual thing. You can continue to use the exact same yarn that you had before. And to begin our work, we're starting with an ear tab is what I'm calling it. It's kind of just like this little crochet triangle before we get to seaming the pieces together. So that is what we're starting with to seam our ears. For row 1 of our first ear tab, we are going to go ahead and create a slip knot and then chain 3. And then very simply, you're just going to single crochet across your chain, skipping that first chain from the hook. So single crochet into the second and third chain from the hook, chain 1 and turn for row 1 of the first ear tab. And I work into the back bumps of my chain. If that's not what you're used to, it's really not going to matter which way you do it. This is just what I do. I'm just kind of explaining my own little method. But yeah, we got that. Row 1 done. chain 1 and turn. For row 2, very easy, just single crochet across, chain 1 and turn. You still have 2 stitches for rows 1 and 2. And then after you chain 1 and turn, row 3 is our last row for this ear tab. You're going to actually decrease into both of those stitches. So if you haven't done this in a while, insert your hook into the next stitch, or the first stitch here, pull up a loop, insert your hook into the last stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. You have 3 loops on your hook, and then you're going to yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops, chain 1, and eventually you will turn your work, but we're actually going to set this aside because we're going to talk a little bit about the seaming method for this pattern before we get into actually doing it. Okay, so I put my work down and I just want to talk a little bit about our anatomy of these ear bases. So we did single crochets rounds 1 through 6 and 7, and now we have our last round, which is the most important round of these ear bases. They're worked into half double crochet, and the reason they are is because we need a specific part of that half double crochet stitch to be able to have an invisible seam for our ears. So on the back side, or the wrong side of my ear base, for that last row, you're going to see a couple things. We have like the post, you see the post, you have the top of the stitch, which is represented by the front and back loops, and then we have this random bar on the back of every single stitch. I'm going to bring it a little closer for you here. That bar, putting my needle underneath it, it's pretty horizontal. It kind of dips a little bit down to the left if it's facing you, and that is going to be directly on the back side of your work. It is separate from the back and the front loops, which if you turn your work to the top, you see a V, and then the back loop and the third loop kind of make this other V, but it goes in the opposite direction. But if I put my needle into the third loop, you're not going to see it on the right side of your work. It's really just going to rest right behind the back loop, just like that. So if that helps you visually understand where I'm coming from here, I know that this is, maybe not the best way to explain it. This is just how I see it in my head. If you want to pause the video and go check out another video on YouTube, there's tons of great creators here and teachers that can break this down even more, maybe more attuned to your learning style, but this is how I see it. I just locate the top of the stitch usually, and then right behind it, I will find my third loop. And that is what we're working into for our seaming stitches. Just be careful that you don't work into the back bump of a chain. So those chain 2s that we started and ended that last round with, you're not working into that chain. So just be careful of that. I've accidentally done that before, and then it ruins the stitch count and it kind of looks all a little wonky. And if I'm going with this back piece here, you see the front of the stitch there, you see the top of the stitch, and then directly behind the top of the stitch, follow that along to find the third loop. It should be easy to get your hook into. It should be easier than you think. And I would also like to mention that, this is something we're going to take our time with. So if you really want to slow down the video, I will not be offended. Even for experienced crocheters, this is just a different thing that I kind of jerry-rigged and found a way to explain it. So to begin our first seaming stitch, insert your hook, pick that piece back up that you started crocheting, that tab, insert your hook into the top of that last stitch of row 3, kind of put your working yarn off to the side so it's out of the way, insert your hook into the last half double crochet's third loop from the front piece here, and then insert your hook into the third loop of the first half double crochet of the back piece. You should have the wrong sides of your ear bases facing each other. Then pick up that working yarn again, and you're going to yarn over and carefully pull through all 4 things on your hook. So you're pulling through the third loop of the back ear base, the third loop of the front ear base, the top of the stitch from row 3 of your ear tab, and then the loop on your hook, the working loop. And that is your first seaming stitch. Okay, so here we go. We're going to continue working along with these seaming stitches. You should have a total of 36 to 42 seaming stitches at the end of this section here. So just keep that in mind if you're a counting person. To do all of the remainder of the seaming stitches, we are going to insert your hook into the next third loop of the front ear base, the one closest to you. Insert your hook into the third loop of the ear base that's furthest away from you. And then you're going to yarn over and you're going to pull through both of those third loops as well as the loop on your hook. So essentially, if I can really break it down as simply as possible here, we're working slip stitches across each set of matched third loops. And you're working those all the way around. We're going to go and work into every single half double crochet. So none should be left behind at the end of this seaming method here. And it's just slip stitches. Just think of it as a slip stitch, but instead of working your hooks through the tops of the stitch, you're working your hooks into that invisible back bar that you would normally see on the back of your work. And the right sides of your ear bases should be facing you, or should be facing each other, and the wrong side should be facing you and away from you. So again, pause the video, watch it without the audio. If my words are tripping you up, I will not be offended. I know we all have different learning styles. Sometimes I'll watch it once with somebody talking to me, and then sometimes I'll just pause it and just watch people's hands work because my brain will pick up different things both of those times. I do this a lot actually when I watch knitting videos because knitting is now my hobby since crochet is now my hustle. But as you can see me working along here, you're going to see the back bump of the seaming stitch on the piece that's furthest away from you, and then you're going to see the top of the slip stitch, or that V of the slip stitch, on the ear base that's closest to you. And that should remain consistent all the way around. Eventually it gets smoother and smoother. I think the first 4 stitches can feel a little weird, but after that everything should completely line up. You should not have any question. And I hope you're enjoying the seaming method. It is, again, much simpler than the other one. Here I'm kind of slowing down. I just want to pull my loop up here so we can pause and just check out our work here. Don't be afraid to stop and redo this completely from the beginning. This is, again, there's a learning curve with this part. I promise it's the hardest part of this pattern. After this, you will have a much smoother ride. But I trust you. You got this. You can trust your own mind and your hands to do what they do best. Not everything we do in crochet is going to be an easy granny square, but you know what? When we get to level up our skills and do these fun things, it just, we feel that much more confident as a maker. So here I'm kind of using my hook to show you the last half double crochets of the ear bases, front and back. Again, just be wary and really do try to count your stitches as you go along, because you don't want to work into those chain 2s at the end of those rounds. The chain 2s are going to be kind of your kryptonite. But here I am, I've seamed everything up. All of the half double crochets are seamed into. I have none left. And now we're going to finish this section by working the second ear tab to kind of mirror that first one that we made. Okay, so you chain 2 once you've finished all of those seams, and you are now going to work an increase into the second chain from the hook. So that's 2 single crochets into the second chain from the hook, and then you're going to chain 1 and turn your work for row 1 of the second ear tab. Then for rows 2 and 3 of the second ear tab, you're just going to work single crochet across, chain 1 and turn. And then at the end of row 3, you're going to fasten off your yarn and then weave in both of the ends from the first and second ear tab. And that is it. If you need to pause and rewind and double check your work because you've reached this part a little too soon, you weren't ready for it, feel free to do so. You will be, again, this was the hardest part of this pattern, but these ear tabs are important, so don't skip this step. If we were to do the other version of the pattern, that is the sew version. We won't use ear tabs at all. So if you're like, I don't want to crochet anymore, maybe just switch to doing the sew version. And all of those variations on this pattern are in the description below. The PDF officially published version of the pattern is in my pattern shops as well, but all the links to all 4 versions of this pattern are in the description below. So check those out if you were curious, or you make this pair up and you're like, you know what, I don't want to use a hot glue gun, or I'm going to work with chunky weight yarn. I do have those options available to you, but I'm going to weave in my ends and I will see you for the next blurb. Okay, now I have all of my ends woven in. I am going to go ahead and eventually turn this inside out. You can check your work and see how you did, but just go ahead and pause the video, grab the other 2 ear bases that you had made previously, and seam them up in the exact same way, creating that first ear tab, and then seaming the half double crochet stitches together, and then creating the second ear tab, fastening off, weaving in your ends, and then you should have 2 identical ear bases. Very exciting. And in the next section, we are going to stabilize and stuff the inside of our ears. So that is the next thing to look forward to. But go ahead and just work up that those other 2 ear bases together with the seaming stitches, and I will see you in a little bit. Okay, so now we're going to finish these ears here before we move on to the next chapter, the next 2 chapters. So grab your ear inserts that you cut out from your foam or your cardboard, whatever you used, and grab the polyfill stuffing. Have a little bit of that for you. You won't need a lot for this pattern, just so you know, unless you want to make them really puffy. That's up to you. Here I'm going to show you, if you wanted a flatter look and you didn't want to use the polyfill, you can stuff 2 ear inserts per ear into the ear. So I just want to reiterate that. If you want to pause the video and cut out a couple more and you like this look as opposed to kind of like the 3-dimensional puffier look, this is another option I discovered. I've done a couple hats in it. It's actually quite nice. I actually kind of like it for guys' hats too, because I think the puffy hat, like girls like squishy things. At least I do. I don't know. I'm going to speak for myself. But if you're doing the version that I most of the time use, you're going to stuff 1 ear insert at a time into each of your ear bases, and making sure that that kind of cookie bite part is tucked all the way in on the inside. You don't want anything sticking out. The round edge should be pushed all the way up to the top of your ear. And you're going to see these slip stitches kind of separate a little bit. Obviously I'm using a contrasting yarn, so you see it more with my work, but that will kind of disappear a little bit once we add the polyfill stuffing. So once you have both of those ear inserts within your ears, grab a little bit of polyfill stuffing at a time, separating it as I do here, and then just lightly stuff the ear on both sides of your foam or cardboard. And big shout out to the sewists that make these ears. The sewists, not crocheters, you heard me right. When I was designing this pattern, I got the inspiration for how to stuff the ears from them. And it is a tried and true method. A lot of them do it this way. So shout out to them for the inspiration. It really helped me kind of like get my yarn engineering under control here, because the crocheting I figured out really fast. How to make the ears stand up and stay alive and well on the top of a headband or a hat was something that took me a minute to kind of figure out, but here we are. We have stuffed 1 of the ears, and as you can see, that seam kind of starts to disappear now that it looks a little more fleshed out. And it is, as you can see, much thinner than the headband version of the ears. So yay to that. We love a nice change every now and then. Go ahead and stuff the other ear if you're following along with me, and I will see you in a little bit. So in case you are feeling like your foam is kind of stretching your piece out, because you really don't want the foam to stretch it out, it's just there to stabilize it, I would recommend, before moving on with anything else in this pattern, pull that foam out and just trim off a little bit from each side, or just one side. It's up to you. But I would rather you have this done now than have this ear kind of glued on to the hat or sewn onto the hat, and then you're like, I can't change anything now. So if you're feeling like your ear insert was a little too wide or misshapen, or you missed a corner or two on cutting it out because you rushed because you were so excited, go ahead and fix that now before moving on to chapter 2. Okay, folks, congratulations on making it this far. You made it past chapter 1, the ear bases. There was very much lots involved in that. We're going to take a step back. The ear bases should be kind of set off to the side here, and we're going to grab our hat, our measuring tape, our marker or writing utensil. You can use a pen as well, as long as it easily writes, and then a pair of scissors as well. We'll use the scissors very briefly for this section, but before we get into putting anything on our hat, I do just want to talk a little bit about where we're lining these ears onto the hat, because that does make a difference. This is where you can truly decide, are you going to follow exactly what I do, or are you going to kind of go off the beaten path and kind of do your own thing? I like to put my ears directly on the side of the hat. So what that means is if your hat has 6 sections, the side 2 sections, not the front 2 or the back 2, are where the ears are going to be placed. Now you can totally adjust those a little bit more forward or farther back. I would make this choice now before you get to writing on the hat. But that is where I place mine. I also really utilize those eyelets that you see in the hat, kind of to line it up and to make sure it's symmetrical on both sides. If your hat doesn't have these, if you have one of those really fancy, like trendy hats where you don't have any seams, you don't have a button, it's just like a baseball cap with a brim and it's one fabric piece, you're going to have to do a little bit of extra work to kind of determine where your ears will be placed. But for the purposes of this tutorial, to make it as approachable as possible, I am going to use this very side section, the eyelet that lines up with the button, and those are going to be my 2 measuring points. So now that we kind of talked about that, just so you know, the marker that we're using or the pen that we're using will not show up on the inside of your work or on the outside of the hat once the ears are in place. Once the ears are attached, you will not see anything you wrote onto your hat, as long as you didn't go crazy and choose this to be your next artistic coloring project. But I'm using the button as my kind of like guiding North Star for where I'm making all of these measurements. So go ahead, pick that measuring tape up. Starting at the button or the center point of the hat, you're going to take a measurement down the side of the hat at 1/4 inch for the child size, or 1.5 inches for the adult size. And this really does make a difference, because the 2 different sizes will kind of vary. For the child size, you want the ears to be a little bit closer together, and for the adult size, you want them to be a little bit farther apart. So again, from that center button, I'm measuring 1.5 inches for the adult size, or 1.25 inches for the child size, and then I'm going to make either a single dot or just a dash. If you want to do a dot first and then draw a dash through it, that's fine. If you have the written version of this pattern, I kind of do this step a little bit differently, but it's the same thing. You just want to make a mark where the hat will have the ears start on the innermost point, and then you're going to make a mark where the ears are going to finish being attached to. So this is what we're doing in the next step here. We're making our second measurement. I'm using, again, the eyelet to kind of make sure that I'm going directly down that side segment, the center of the side segment. So I'm lining up my 2.5 inch mark here, or 2 inch if you're working the child size, and I'm making a second mark where the ear is going to end. So I'm, if you want to flip the hat around and do it this way, that's fine. For me to film this, I had to have the brim facing away from me. So again, these instructions are a little tiny bit different from the written pattern if you're following along from the pattern. But there we have it. I just have 2 marks where my ear is going to start and end. They should line up with the center line of that side segment here with the eyelet and the button at the top. If you need to kind of adjust it and, you know, extend your dashed line a little bit like I do here, great. Just, again, take note that whatever you are marking onto your hat, if it is larger than the width of your ears, it will be seen later. But that's about it. That's the first two measurements we're going to make. Repeat those same things on the other side of the hat with the second side section here as much as you can. You're going to see me do kind of the opposite of what I did in the beginning. I line up actually the 1.5" mark for the adult size, or 1.25 inches. Then I make that mark at the 0 line, and then I move the measuring tape down and I do the same thing. Either method works, just make sure that you kind of stay consistent. If you're doing this correctly, the adult-sized ears should be 3 inches apart from each other, and the child-sized ears should be 2.5 inches apart from each other. That's about a 1/2 inch difference. Again, if you want to adjust this, you know, feel free. If you have a disappearing ink marker, maybe for your first pair, you can kind of use it, but you still need to see these markings for the next bit here. And then from here on out, once you have confidently made your measurements and your marks, you're going to draw a dashed line between the ends of both of those short lines. So essentially we're making a really skinny rectangle, and the dashed lines are important. Those are going to be kind of gluing guidelines for where we attach the bottoms of the ears to. So go ahead and draw the dashed lines connecting those two short lines that we first made, giving you a skinny rectangle, and see you in a little bit. Okay, hang in there with me. Now we're going to be completely crazy, not reckless, just a little crazy. You're going to pinch those short solid lines that we first used to mark the beginning and ends of the hat, and you're going to cut on those lines. You're cutting them crosswise, and again, here is where you do need to be careful. Less is more. Cut as little as you can, because you do not want this cut to kind of like peek out from underneath the ear. This is just to pull the tabs through if you're curious and want to read ahead into the design. So just a very short cut, and you're going to do that on both sides of the hat. And also I want to add, if your hat has fabric that is fraying and you want to kind of keep that from happening and you don't want any runs in the fabric of your hat, once you do this part, go ahead and get some fray check or clear nail polish and seal that cut so that it doesn't create a weird look in your fabric of your hat, because your hat's going to be stretched, put on your head, you're going to be sweating in it, wearing it in the parks. You don't want any seams or any rips in the hat to start occurring. So go ahead and seal those cuts if you want to. If you don't care and this is just your practice piece, let's move on to the next step, or chapter 3. Okay, here we go. Welcome to chapter 3. Now we're going to add our ears to our hat finally, the moment you've all been waiting for. The first step we need to do is to, and again, we're just working one ear at a time here just to keep it easier on the eyes. First step we're going to do is we're going to pull those tabs that we crocheted through those holes that we cut from the last step of the hat prep. So if you're like me and it's a little hard to push these tabs through, I actually grab my crochet hook and I use that to pull the tabs through. So poke that crochet hook through the inside of your hat to the outside, hook it onto the bottom edge of that ear tab, and again, just go ahead and pull that through. And you're going to do that for each ear tab, connecting one side to the other. And this is your last chance to double check and make sure that your ears are looking like you want them to. So that might mean maybe you add a little more polyfill, you take the polyfill completely out and do more ear inserts, or you know, it's really up to you. But I would say the next bit we're going to do involves the hot glue gun. So once we get to that part, there is no turning back. So pull those tabs through as much as you can. They don't need to be like super, super taut, but and then before we start gluing, I just kind of gently tug and stretch the bottom edge of each of the ears, each side of the ear here. We're going to be gluing that bottom edge to the dotted line that you see that we drew. So yeah, that's why I kind of pull it stretched a little bit so I have an easier time of setting it down. And then grab your hot glue gun now that's warmed up on the low temp side and add or dispense a line of glue onto that dotted line. Less is more. I said this in the headband tutorial and I'm going to say it now here. Less is more. Just a thin line will do. You can always add more later, and then carefully line up and press the bottom edge of that same side onto the line of glue. While it's still hot, you can kind of push it around to make sure that it's in line with itself and kind of like, you know, not like squonky. But go ahead and hold it and press that down. This is a chance for you also to use your hook in case you don't want to burn your fingers, or you just want to like make sure that you don't smear anything. Because for me, anytime my glue gets on my hook, because it's metal, it just peels right off, which is nice. So I sometimes use it to catch like splotches of glue that kind of ooze out if I've added too much glue. And then you're going to repeat that same step to the other side of the ear, adding glue to that dotted line and then carefully pressing that bottom edge of the ear onto the line. I would hold it for maybe about like 10 seconds just to be on the safe side, just so it properly adheres. It will continue to adhere and cure as you finish your hat, but go ahead and repeat that to the other side of the ear and I will see you in a little bit. Okay, now that the outside of the hat is glued down for the most part, we're going to flip this hat over so that we have access to the ear tabs that we pulled through, and we're going to secure these now to the inside of the hat. Pardon me and me trying to peel back the layers of the hat for this. So what we're going to do is you can glue these two different ways, but I prefer this direction because I think that it's better to not see any glue coming through to the outside of the hat, which if your hat is of cheaper or thinner material, if you glue the ear tabs away from each other down the side of the hat even further towards the edge of the hat, you're going to potentially see that on the outside of the hat and it just doesn't look as clean. So I'm going to add some glue to the inside of the tabs and I'm going to press them towards each other onto the fabric of the hat. So go ahead and grab your hot glue gun, making sure you've pulled those tabs as much as you can, to pull them out a little bit more. Add some glue in a little zigzag formation on the inside of the tab, just like that. Again, you really don't need that much. I'm going to use my hook here to kind of fold it down and initially press it down while the glue is at its hottest, and I'm smoothing it down and I'm pressing it down towards the other ear tab. Okay, so you don't want to, again, do too much glue. You really don't need this much for this part. It's really just to get it tacked down. You can, again, always add more later. And you're going to see that cut there, but because it's the inside of the hat, it doesn't really matter. You're going to repeat that same thing to the other tab, so adding glue to the inside of it there and then pressing it down to meet the other tab. If you've done this correctly, those ear tabs should easily meet each other in the middle, and if they overlap, it's okay too, because this actually will provide a little bit of cushion and kind of like a platform for your ears to kind of keep standing up straight. So I highly recommend this. We don't get to do this with the sew version of the pattern, so if you were to ask me which one I prefer, I actually prefer the glue method, but you know, everybody's got their thing. So if you don't like hot glue guns, then you know, you wouldn't even be watching this video. And then the last thing we're gonna do in adhering our ear to the hat, we're going to take a short bit of glue and we're going to add that right at the edge that we cut, that cut edge line there where we pulled the ear tabs through. And then we're going to pinch and press the chain 2 corners of our ears onto that line. And that way we're going to completely conceal and hide that cut that we made into the hat, and you're just going to secure those bottom corners down. You really don't need a lot of glue for this. In fact, the least amount that you can do is probably the best. But we're doing this just so that nothing kind of pulls up over time. And if you're super, super anal like me, you can totally do it a second time just to make sure that it's all secure. But repeat that same thing to the other side. So just add a little bit of glue just at the edge of that cut mark that we made. And then pinch and press those chain 2 corners of the ear bases onto your hat, just like that. And just in case in my editing process, I did not remove the background noise. If you're hearing any sounds of a little child or other people talking, it's because I live in a very busy household. So just, forgive me. I'm a mompreneur. I'm not going to hide my lifestyle and my family from, my work, but that's the noise you're hearing if you were hearing anything besides my voice. And then at this point, that should be pretty secure. If you need to add more glue in where you didn't have as much, go ahead and do that. But pause the video, repeat all those adhering instructions for the second ear that you made, and I'll see you for closing remarks. Okay, congratulations! You have officially made your very first Ever After hat. I hope you have enjoyed this modification on the Ever After headband, but technically it's kind of its own pattern in itself, so well done you. Please leave me a comment down below if you like this video, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, do all the things, and let's change over to my actual face so I can say goodbye to you properly. Thank you so much for watching.
All right, Magical Makers, that concludes today's tutorial for the Ever After hat with the medium weight yarn glue version. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope this has been a fun project for you. I love working on magical projects. Please leave me any comments and questions down below. If anything from this pattern is confusing to you, I would love to be of assistance. I am a stay-at-home mom, so I have plenty of time to check my notifications and reply back to you. I am here for you in your magical crochet journey. And on that note, have a creative day, adding magic to your stitches in your own way, and I will see you in the next tutorial.